This video is meant for revision. It deals with what, not how and why, and use with the video with caution please, only after you have done your course. Price mechanism is the way of allocating resources considering the forces of demand and supply, primarily used as a means of allocating resources in the market economy and also in the mixed economy with some government controls. The ability and willingness of consumers to buy goods and services is demand. The law of demand states that price and quantity demanded has a negative or inverse relationship for a normal good. As price increases, quantity demanded decreases. As price decreases, quantity demanded increases. Normal goods are goods whose demand increase with an increase in our income or ability to buy. The more income you may have, the more demand would you have for traveling abroad or traveling in your own private transport instead of public ones. Goods whose demand decreases with an increase in our income or ability to spend, such as public transport, the more you earn, the lesser would be your demand for second-hand clothes. Hence, second-hand clothes are inferior goods. Demand by one consumer for a good or service at different price is known as individual demand. Whereas market demand is a demand for good or service by all the consumers in a market at a given price or at different prices. Market demand hence is the sum of all individual demand at different price. Demand curve is the visual representation of the market demand of a product, plots the relationship between price and quantity demanded of a product. The demand curve is downward sloping of a normal good. It shows that the relationship between price and the quantity demanded is inverse or negative. When price decreases, the quantity demanded of a good and service increases. There is going to be movement along the curve. If the price is currently at P0 and the quantity demanded is at Q0, as the price decreases from P0 to P1, the quantity will increase from Q0 to Q1. There is going to be movement along the curve, and this is known as extension in demand. When price increases, the quantity demand of a good and service decreases. This is known as contraction in demand, and this too is represented by movement along the curve. If the price is currently at P0 and the quantity demanded is at Q0, then as price increases from P0 to P1, quantity demanded will fall to Q1. There will be movement along the curve, and this is known as contraction in demand. Factors which increase demand will shift the demand curve to the right. These are also known as non-price factors. Increase in income for normal goods, decrease in income for inferior goods, increased preference, increased advertising. The more advertising is done on a product, the higher the demand it may have. Decrease in price of complements. Complements are goods or services which are used together, such as petrol and cars, such as phone and mobile chargers. Increase in price of substitutes. Substitutes are those products which are used in place of each other and share the same characteristics, such as Pepsi and Coke. The increase in demand is represented by a forward shift of the demand curve or shifting the demand curve towards the right. The demand curve is going to shift from D0 to D1, the price will remain the same, and the quantity is going to increase from Q0 to Q1. Factors which decrease demand will shift the demand curve to the left. Decrease in income for normal goods, decrease in income inferior goods, decreased preference, decreased advertising, increase in price of complements, and decrease in price of substitutes. A decrease in demand is represented by a backward shift. The demand curve is going to shift from D0 to D1, and the quantity demanded is going to decrease from Q0 to Q1. This is how a decrease in demand due to non-price factors is shown on a graph. Supply is the ability and willingness of producers to sell goods and services. The law of supply states that as price increases, the supply of a product will increase. Individual supply is the quantity which a single producer is willing to supply at different price. Supply of a good or service by all the producers in a market at different prices is known as market supply. Market supply is the sum of all individual supply at different prices. Visual representation of the market supply of a product is known as a supply curve. It plots the relationship between price and quantity supplied of a product. The supply curve is upward sloping for a normal good. It shows that the relationship between price and quantity supplied is positive. As price increases, quantity supplied is also going to increase. If price decreases, quantity supplied will decrease also. Extension in supply is when price increases, the quantity supplied of a good and service will increase. There's going to be movement along the curve. Extension in supply is shown as a movement along the curve. If the price increases from P0 to P1, the quantity supplied is going to increase from Q0 to Q1. There's going to be movement along the curve, and this movement is known as extension in supply. When price decreases, the quantity supplied of a good and service decreases. It will be movement along the curve also. As price decreases from P0 to P1, quantity supplied is going to fall from Q0 to Q1, and this movement is known as a contraction in supply. Factors which increase the supply will shift the supply curve to the right. These factors are known as non-price factors. Increase in profits will encourage more suppliers to enter the market, and hence the supply of a product is going to increase. Decrease in average cost is going to increase the profit per unit, which is going to result in an increase in supply. Increase in productivity of resources means that the cost per unit is going to fall. Increase in quantity of resources, maybe the economy has found new oil wells, and this is going to increase the supply. New technology will increase productivity, and whatever will increase productivity will increase supply also. Net immigration means the number of people entering a country are more, so that means we have more labor force, that means we can produce more, hence the supply is going to increase. Excuse me. Decrease in price of substitutes. An increase in supply is shown as a forward shift in the supply curve. The supply curve is going to shift from S0 to S1 while the price remains the same, and the quantity supplied is going to shift from Q0 to Q1. So there's going to be an increase in quantity supplied. So factors which decrease supply will shift the supply curve to the left, and That could be due to a decrease in profits, increase in average costs, decrease in productivity of resources, decrease in quantity of resources, net emigration, which means that the people are leaving an economy. Wars and conflicts will reduce the level of resources and it's going to reduce supply. Depletion also, increase in price of substitutes. A decrease in supply is shown as the supply curve shifting backwards from S0 to S1. The price will remain the same and the quantity supplied is going to fall from Q0 to Q1. Market equilibrium is the price at which quantity demanded and supplied remains the same. There is no shortage or no surplus, also known as the market clearing price. In the diagram, at P0, demand and supply intersect, and at this point there is an equilibrium, there is no shortage, no surplus, and at this point the price is known as the equilibrium price and the quantity is known as the equilibrium quantity because quantity demanded and quantity supplied is the same. Price at which quantity demanded and supplied are not the same is known as market disequilibrium. The first type of market disequilibrium is shortage. It's a price at which quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. In the diagram, we can see that P0 is the equilibrium price. If the price in the economy is or for a particular good is at P1, which means it is lower than the equilibrium price, that means the demand is going to be greater than supply. We can see that quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. Hence, there is going to be a shortage. A price at which quantity demanded is less than quantity supplied is known as surplus. P1 is greater than P0, which means that the prices are higher than the equilibrium. At this price, supply is greater than demand, which means there is a surplus. Consumer surplus is not to be confused with surplus. This is the benefit enjoyed by the consumer who are willing to pay a higher price for a good than it is currently offered at. In this diagram, we can see that there are still some consumers who are willing to pay a higher price than P0. If they are offered a price P0, it's a benefit to them. The consumer surplus is shown by the shaded triangle region and it is above the market equilibrium price all the way till the end of the demand curve. Benefit enjoyed by the producer who are willing to receive a lower price for a good than it is currently offered at is known as producer surplus. We can see in the diagram that some producers were willing to supply the product at a price lower than P0, but since they are being offered a price higher, then it's a benefit to them. The producer surplus is marked as the shaded region below the equilibrium price all the way till the end of the supply curve.